might think that the name Small Business Administration would be a clear description of what that government agency does: support small businesses and make sure that they get a fair share of federal contracts. Well, not quite.
As the new head of the Small Business Administration was sworn in today, Democrats on Capitol Hill were suggesting a new name for his agency, maybe something like the Big Business Administration. That's because so many government contracts intended for small firms are going instead to some of the biggest corporate names in America. According to an investigation by Democrats on the House Small Business Committee, last year a hefty $12 billion in federal contracts were given to, if you can believe it, names like Microsoft, Rolls-Royce, and Walmart, 2,500 big businesses in all.
Alarming new evidence tonight of widespread fraud in a federal government program designed to give money to small businesses.
Every year, billions of dollars in government contracts intended for small businesses go instead to large corporations. The result is billions of dollars in losses for those small businesses, the biggest source of jobs in this country, by the way.
Lloyd Chapman, the president of the American Small Business League.
The government's done everything that they can to cover this up, where you can't tell who's getting government contracts. They've removed the parent company Dun & Bradstreet number off the database. You can no longer see how many employees the company has, their annual revenue. You can't even tell what business they're in. Anytime you want any information from any federal agency about who gets small business contracts, you're going to court.
Do these look like small businesses to you? Or these? Well, they did to the government, which handed out fat contracts that were supposed by law to go to small businesses.
Tens of millions of dollars in contracts awarded by federal agencies meant for small businesses are actually going to huge Fortune 500 companies.
What's stunning is the U.S. Small Business Administration has known about this for years. We found 10 reports by the SBA Inspector General dating back to 2005, all saying the same thing. Flaws in the system allow large firms to land small business contracts.
If President Obama would stop the government from diverting small business contracts to Fortune 500 firms, it would put more money into the middle class and create more jobs than any economic stimulus program that President Bush or President Obama ever put forth. Depending on whom you talk to, Texas-born small business advocate Lloyd Chapman is either a modern-day Cesar Chavez or a conspiracy theorist with a grudge. Either way, as the SBA has learned, he's become hard to ignore. I was being interviewed by Forbes, Fortune, and Business Week, and I think the Associated Press. And I'd never been on national television when these had come out. Now I've done maybe 40 national television appearances. I guess since these came out, I've won, I don't know, maybe another couple of dozen lawsuits. I've got a bill in Congress. So my accomplishments are 10 times what they were back in these days. But my opinion is the government has put forth a massive campaign to keep Lloyd Chapman, out of the press. They don't want to hear about billions in federal contracting fraud.
Chapman estimates that last year more than $10 billion that should have gone to small businesses ended up going to large corporations. And fixing the problem, he says, could help unemployment.
This is more money and would create more jobs than anything that President Obama or Congress have proposed so far.
Chapman says the Small Business League has been trying to get Congress to do something about this issue for 8 years.
Claims that over the last decade, small businesses have been cheated out of as much as $1 trillion.
Federal law says the small businesses are supposed to get 23% of all government contracts, which would be around $253 billion a year. Well, the government is using a number that's less than half of the real acquisition budget, which is about 480. And they're claiming that last year small businesses got $89 billion, and most of that went to Fortune 500 firms. I'm just so tired, just like so many people. I'm so disappointed, but it's time that needs to change. The large corporations misrepresent their subsidiaries and divisions as small businesses, and they're hijacking billions of dollars a month in contracts that should be going to the middle class where most Americans work, where all the jobs are created.
Lloyd Chapman, your reaction?
Well, I think about a term a friend of mine uses called chin music. It's just all talk, in my opinion. So when you see President Obama talking about his concern for small businesses, realize that the most recent information released by the Obama administration showed that the largest recipient of federal small business contract was Textron, a Fortune 500 firm with, I think, 43,000 employees. Small businesses should not be afraid of the government, just the opposite. You need to challenge their policies. You need to use the Freedom of Information Act to show who's really getting those contracts. Read all the federal investigation, watch all the media stories, and challenge them. Thomas Jefferson said, when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. And when the government fears the people, you have liberty. So being afraid of the government is stupid. It's absurd, and it doesn't function.
What can the government do to help small businesses create more jobs?
I think it's real simple. The U.S. Census Bureau tells us that small businesses create 95% of all net new jobs. And there's a federal law that says 23% of all government contracts should go to small businesses, and yet there's been, I think, 25 investigations to show that that's not happening. So there's a new bill in Congress called H.R. 2568 that will stop the government from giving small business contracts to Fortune 500 corporations. That'll redirect about $100 billion a year in current federal infrastructure spending to the middle-class economy. I think that's the most effective thing that anyone's proposed so far. If I can get small businesses organized, get my bill passed, I think it'll redirect more money into the middle class than any economic stimulus program that's been passed in the last 20 years.